Tonight, we're going to be discussing the UFO subject and how it began in the United States.
Since the early days, like
The
I had
very
no
early
idea.
days.
I had no idea there was such witnesses at that time.
Yeah, I was surprised myself when I did some of the research that some of the cases were as old as they were.
Yeah, it's just weird.
You know,
it's just really strange.
You tend to think of UFOs as being something of the modern era.
The Roswell era, and yeah, I mean,
And-
that's
and
what we
beyond.
know. But yeah, I guess
But
There's witness.
throughout time, strange things have been reported in the sky.
yes, and everywhere in the world. I mean, I
all
think,
around the world. It's not just in the United States. But why don't we take a look at the first reported UFO case in America? So the first documented case of a UFO report in the United States was out of Boston, Massachusetts in 1639, if you can believe that.
1639.
That was a long time ago. Governor John Winthrop wrote an account in his diary recording the event that he and other people witnessed. He first noticed a light above the Charles River that was
Charles River in Boston. Yeah.
in Boston that was rapidly moving back and forth across the river. He didn't note any particular speed. He just said that it moved very rapidly.
Can I ask? I mean, across the river, was it like from one bank to the other, or was it like along? It doesn't say, right?
It doesn't say, however.
Oh, you have
However,
an answer. You have an answer for this.
what it does say is that it moved between Charleston and Back Bay Fens. And those are on opposite sides of the river.
Right.
So it probably moved in a diagonal direction across the river, not back and forth,
Right,
but
right,
on
right,
a
right.
diagonal.
Gotcha.
And it repeated a pattern over and over as it flew back and forth. And this event lasted for 3 hours.
That's a long time. Was there anything they might have flown over that was interesting them, like powerful, or?
Well, MIT is around that area, but they weren't around yet. That might have been
That might-
very
yeah.
interesting at the time.
I'm just wondering why this area and why going in between.
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
If anybody knows what was happening in 1639 in Boston, Massachusetts, leave a comment below and
Yeah, if you know
tell
any
us.
more about this story,
Yeah.
we'd like to hear the additional details. One thing that he did say was when he first noticed the object, he saw a light in the sky and he wondered what is
What
that?
it was, yeah.
So he stood up to get a better look, and as he did that, it turned from a light into a flame.
A flame.
A flame. And he said from the distance he was looking at it, it looked like it was 3 meters long, or I'm sorry, 3 yards long.
Right.
But
and it couldn't be a meteor that just catch on fire because he was going back and forth.
Exactly. Meteors only go one direction, down.
And
So,
boom.
because he was a governor,
They took his.
he's very educated. He's a well-respected.
So they pay attention to what I was
Yes.
saying because it
Yes.
wasn't just.
It wasn't just you or I reporting something that we
Yeah.
saw. Now I'm sure there were other.
Witnesses, but they were probably.
There were other
They
witnesses.
probably
He-
disregarded because they were. Yeah.
he noted in his journal that there were other people, even on the other side of the river, that saw it.
I'm sure at this time, like something like this was
Right, and something that lasted
yeah.
for 3 hours.
It's a long time. Yeah.
It's a very long time because usually you hear about UFO reports and they're like 3 seconds, 5
Right,
seconds.
Right.
This one lasted a while.
And there was no
And
camera.
there wasn't a lot of technology back in those days either. So it's
Right.
interesting that that it had the fuel or the power to be able to fly for 3 hours.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
I wonder if there's illustrations of it, like people tried or gravures or.
I would be interesting to find that out myself.
Because that was the only way for them to report things in newspapers or whatever. It was to draw.
Right.
It was illustrations.
Right. Now, I'm sure there were many other incidents that happened between
Right.
then and what I'm about to talk about, which is the 1890s airship wave,
The airships.
the airships of 1890s. It was a very famous case in Sacramento, California. It was reported by an inventor's attorney. So also another person who is educated
or
in the law, right? And his name was George D. Collins. And in the Call, which is the Sacramento newspaper. There's an etching, because they did etchings for the newspapers back in those days.
Your etching.
What's interesting about this illustration here is it looks like it's football shaped, possibly. It has two wings, a tail section, and then it has two spotlights, it looks like, or two lights. They're shining out, one in the front and one on the bottom. And there were a lot of people who saw this. And so the story caught on, and it spread across the United States, and it was in some other newspapers as well, front page. And what's interesting is the drawings from the other newspapers, they're all different. Even though it's the same account, it's based on whatever that artist's imagination was, I suppose. But what's interesting is they all have a light. They all have a
light emission.
Right. They all have a light on them. They all have a fuselage that is kind of football shaped or fuselage shaped. They have wings. They have tails. They have propellers. And the really interesting thing is that some of the men who saw this airship reported that they saw the occupants on board,
right,
and that they could overhear those occupants in conversation. So it was either very close to them, or the machine didn't make much noise.
Yeah.
So that they were able to hear them, or maybe the occupants of these things were yelling at each other because the engines were loud. We don't know. We weren't there. There wasn't a lot of technology, especially for getting into the sky in those days.
Well, so imagine seeing something like this and trying to describe it with what you know, what you have as a.
So this was in the 1890s. So you know when the balloon was invented?
Yeah, by the
It was invented by the French, correct?
The Montgolfier brothers. All right, so they developed the hot air balloon in 1782
to 84. They were doing experiments.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was actually a pretty balloon. I mean, it had ropes, you had decorations, and it was
right. So that was invented before this sighting.
Right.
So it possibly could have been a balloon.
It could.
It could have been a balloon.
It could be a balloon test that just empty that goes.
They could have had lights on it. Lanterns, and because it's a balloon, there's no sound, and you would hear the people talking
and going back and forth.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The people who witnessed this said it was very unusual for, they've never seen anything like it. I did a little bit of research, and I noticed that there were patents back at that same time period. Like in 1874, I have one patent here, another one in 1894. And these are both before this incident occurred.
Well, when you think about it, like 1870, 80, 90, it's all the beginning, the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. It's the big, it's when everything started, really. So I'm not surprised of all those patent and people getting excited about the new technology, the new,
But also during that time period, there was no TV, no radio.
No.
So a lot of people read books.
Read or drew, or
a lot of people read science fiction.
Right.
And, it's the description of this aircraft is very Jules Verne. Or you say it. You sound
Jules Verne.
Sounds so much better when he says it.
Yeah, Jules. Trip to the moon.
Right.
Using magnetism to, for the anti-gravity, which is pretty smart for the time.
Yeah, exactly. So he knew a little bit about science.
Yeah.
Doing this research, I ran across this photo from April 16th, 1897. There was a mystery airship that landed in Waterloo, Iowa.
In Iowa. Wow.
Yeah. in Iowa.
There's also, well, that was 1868. I was reading there's a airship sighting in Copiapo in Chile also.
Oh, really?
Maybe, I don't know if it's the same one. I mean, I don't know.
I think a lot of people were experimenting with
Yeah.
zeppelins and balloons and things
I
like
think
that
so.
back in those. In this photograph here, what's very interesting is you can tell that it's man-made.
Of course, yeah.
It's definitely man-made.
That lantern.
Yeah, it has a lantern on the front. It has two football-shaped balloons and a canopy in the center. It looks like the canopy got crushed. And judging by the gentleman who's standing next to it, we're guessing he's 6 feet tall?
Yeah, maybe.
Something like that,
It
maybe.
looks pretty tall.
So the object is probably
Like
7 feet tall
5
and maybe
feet, yeah.
15 feet across, and I'm guessing 15 feet square on its central axis, based on the rope line that's surrounding this object.
It's funny. That's what I was looking at. They roped the object.
Yeah, they roped it off like a police line.
Right.
Right.
Do not cross.
Yeah, it's a very interesting photograph. But you can tell it's very rudimentary.
Even the materials are
Yeah,
really...
the materials are
from the time.
But for the time,
it's
if you've never seen anything like that,
No,
it could have been...
The design itself is really avant-garde, but...
yeah, exactly. Even now it's avant-garde.
yeah.
It doesn't look very pretty, as far as design goes.
It's that oil lamp in front.
Right.
Well, that candle light. I don't know what it is.
Who knows? It could be a candle. Look.
Yeah.
Right here.
I see in the middle of the candle.
Yeah, it could be a candle. Who knows?
They found this just like in a field like this. It was...
Yeah, it just came down.
Just came down. Wow.
Just came down. So we're going to skip a little forward in time now to another time when there were a lot of sightings.
Right.
And it was towards the end of World War II.
Right.
And I'm talking about the Foo Fighters.
The Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters.
Not the band.
Not the band. Okay.
Not the band.
The original
The
Foo
original
Fighters.
Foo Fighters.
During World War II, towards the end of the war, the Allied forces were seeing these aircraft that coming up to their aircraft, flying around them, going in between their wings, flying alongside of them.
So they were just trolling them, basically.
Exactly, like playing with them.
Playing with them.
Basically. And then shoot off in a direction and come back. And so
Playful.
the U.S. and Allied forces thought that they might be a new German weapon.
Right.
And they were concerned at the time. Now, the ironic thing was the Germans were seeing them as well, and they thought they were the Allied forces. And there were no answers.
Right,
the war
'cause nobody
ended, and nobody knew what they really were. We only speculate. Then there was speculation that it could have been the Russians.
Right. Like in the 80s.
That it could have been the Russians.
60s.
It could have been their new weapon.
Yeah.
They could have captured some German scientists,
yeah.
before the war ended or
I
whatever.
mean, we'll go into it, but yeah, the Germans, we'll see later on in future episode what all the technology they had.
Right.
Crazy technology.
Right. They were way ahead of their
Very
time.
advanced, yeah. Because they were focusing really on
Way
that.
ahead of their time.
You told me something interesting about Foo Fighters. You said, because I didn't know, the word foo
Comes from the French word for fire.
fire, which is feu, F-E-U.
Right. But
feu-
the Americans
Fa-fa-fi-fa-fu.
couldn't pronounce it. I
Right.
mean, they heard the pronunciation
Yes.
and misspelled it.
Misspelled that.
So it's F-O-O.
Like my name. I mean,
And then it stuck.
but yeah, there's a lot of them. Okay. No, I just wanted to.
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting
yeah.
because I never know where it came from.
We're going to move to a very instrumental year for the UFO subject. And I'm talking about 1947. And I can already tell in the back of your head, you're going, I know what you're going to talk about. Well, guess what?
No, I don't.
There's several things that happened in 1947.
I know it.
The first of which was that there were scientists at Los Alamos Laboratory. 1947, these scientists were conducting experiments at night, and they were witnessing what they called green fireballs that were
The green fire. Yeah, right.
that were traveling from as far as you could see in one direction on the horizon to as far as you can see on the other direction on the horizon in seconds.
In seconds.
Which the speed was astronomical, especially
And still now.
still now,
Still now,
but
we don't have that
especially
technology.
in 1947.
Right.
So it was a big concern to the intelligence community,
Right.
because it wasn't Joe average, truck driver reporting he saw some lights in the sky, which could have been a meteor.
Right.
These are scientists. These are government scientists who know about atmospheric phenomena.
Right.
And they were saying this is not atmospheric.
Right. And
These are somehow appear to be controlled, lights of some sort.
Right.
And they couldn't explain it.
Well, they must have been scared because, like during World War II, like we said, the Germans had the V2s, which were like a big technological advancement, right?
Right.
Being able to send like missiles, whatever, far away. And 2 years later, people see those lights in the sky, different color,
Right.
and be like, oh, shoot. Is the war starting again? I mean, anything could be possible
Right,
in their head. Yeah.
They might have thought that there might be a German faction that
Right.
didn't know the war was over, and they had
Yeah.
developed some new technology that we need to be worried about. So even though Project Grudge was ending,
Right.
there was another project
Another one.
that happened in between the center of Project Grudge. Whether they knew about each other, I don't know.
Oh, in between. Oh, that's
Yes.
interesting. Oh, yeah, because 49
Yes.
and the other started.
Yeah. Because the
Wow.
other project was called Project Twinkle,
Right.
and that started October 1st of 1950, and it ended in March 31st of 1951.
Wow.
And the whole purpose of Project Twinkle was to re-examine those green fireballs
Again.
that were seen over Los Alamos, because now they've been seen over other facilities as well.
So by then, it's been 3 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? 47 to 50, 3 years. And they still,
And the intelligence community was very concerned that it may be a new Russian weapon,
right.
or that the Russians are spying on us over our installations. So they set up a network of observation and photographic stations at these various facilities. And so during the course of the investigation, they would collect whatever data over that specific site that they were able to catch.
Right.
And in March of 1951, the program was terminated. And the reason for that was that most of the observations were planes, balloons, rockets, and natural phenomena such as birds, small clouds, and even meteorites.
But
So they didn't capture anything
Anything else
extraordinary
that we know of.
during that time frame, unfortunately.
And
So
this was a secret. Project Twinkle was a secret, right?
yes,
It
they
was
all
secret.
were.
They all were
So
secret.
Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Twinkle, they were all secret programs by the Air Force. But based on the overflights in Washington, D.C., over the White House, over the Capitol building,
Right.
over the secure airspace, the Air Force decided to get out in front of the problem and started a public information program called Project Blue Book.
The famous Project
The
Blue
famous
Book.
Project Blue Book. And
Which is,
that started in March of 1952, and it ended in December of 1969. But Blue Book was the first publicly acknowledged UFO program done by the Air Force. And the only problem was it was highly understaffed. They only had a director, 2 officers who would go out and do the investigations,
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then they had
field officers, you would call this?
yes,
Okay.
and then they had 2 secretaries.
One
Now,
for each. Yeah,
They
okay.
they started collecting, investigating a lot of cases. So at one point, they needed a scientific advisor.
Okay.
And that's when they approached Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And he was, at the time, astronomy professor at Northwestern University. And he had also taught at Ohio State. Their thinking was that he could help explain away some of the more mundane sightings that were actually
Right.
meteorites or some type of natural phenomena such as the aurora borealis or
Right.
things like of that nature.
Okay.
But one of the main things about Blue Book was because it was a public information program, they were
Right.
downplaying a lot of the sightings,
Right.
trying to explain away as many as they could,
Right.
and the ones that were of a higher strangeness level, as Dr. Hynek would say,
Right.
those were kind of siphoned off,
Disregard.
and you didn't hear much about those because of all the amount of sightings that they were investigating.
Right.
They needed to organize the files in some type of way.
Yeah, there was no computer really at the time.
Well-
I mean, there was,
Well,
but
ironically, they hired a subcontractor named Jacques Vallée.
Jacques Vallée.
Yes, and he was a computer expert. And what he did was he built a database for them for their
doing
sightings. Yeah, so he worked with Dr. Hynek to organize all the files into a database.
Oh, wow. Well, it took a long time.
Yeah, yeah. In the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Right.
the main investigator, the French investigator, was based on
Oh,
a
Jacques
Jacques
Vallée.
Vallée character.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Which is,
Right. I never
Very
heard of
interesting.
Jacques Vallée.
you never heard of him.
No.
He's written many books. He actually has in his possession some materials that are possibly, well, they came from crash sites, supposed crash sites.
Okay.
He has physical evidence from some type of crashes. He's looking into trying to get the funding. He's working with scientists in Silicon Valley to try to analyze these materials because now there's some new
Evidence.
equipment
Oh.
that can
right.
do some new type of spectral analysis or chemical analysis, whatever it might be. So he has multiple samples in his personal possession that he's trying to get analyzed at this time. But he doesn't want to say what they are or too much about them until they've been analyzed and they've been written up in the scientific journals. And then he'll release the information. But right now, he doesn't want to say what they are, where they came from, how he got them, none of that information.
And he's still alive. He's 81
Yes.
years old.
He's still alive.
Still alive. Yeah, I'm just reading right now. I mean, he's got a PhD from Northwestern University.
And that's how he knows Dr. Hynek.
Right. And he's went to the University of Paris. He did a lot of stuff. He's one of the internet pioneer, computer scientist, venture capitalist.
Yes, he's also a venture capitalist. I forgot to mention that.
Ufologist, astronomer. He's actually right now residing in San Francisco, California, and in Paris. I hope he's still alive. I mean,
the last I heard, he's in Silicon Valley. I think he's living in Silicon Valley now. I might be wrong, but I believe that's what I heard.
Oh, actually, you know, funny thing. So as we were talking earlier about Jules Verne, right? Well, there's an award called the Jules Verne Award that he was awarded. He was awarded the Jules Verne Prize for his first science fiction novel, Le Subespace, The Subspace, in 1961.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Published under the pseudonym of Jérôme Sériel. Wow, something to look at, to read
Yeah, we'll
about.
have to check that out.
Yeah. So it's called Le Subespace, Subspace.
So the English version would be called Subspace.
Subspace,
Jacques
1961.
Vallée.
But it's by Jérôme Sériel. He changed his name.
Ah,
You know, because
okay.
you never know.
We'll have to look that
Yeah,
up on
we'll
Amazon
look at
Books or something.
Yeah.
So in 1952, also, there were incursions over the secure airspace over the White House and the
Right.
Capitol building. And that was very concerning at the time as well, because they were in places they shouldn't have been.
Right. Nobody would. I don't think anybody. I mean, even right now, it's a non-flying zone anyway.
Exactly. These are no-fly zones. So the military was very concerned, and they set up some aircraft to intercept these objects. And as soon as the aircraft got onto the radar screen, all unidentifieds
Right.
blinked out. They tried to get on the tail of these things, and as soon as they got on the radar screen,
It's
they just
gone.
disappeared.
Yeah, they're gone.
So they flew around looking for them. They
Yeah.
didn't see anything. They said, we're going to go back to base. And as soon as they left the airspace,
Yeah.
these objects just reappeared as if they turned on like a light.
Right.
They didn't just fly in, they were just there.
Mm-hmm.
And so these objects were flying around with impunity over the secure airspace.
Right.
And this happened over several weekends.
It's what you said. Yeah, what you mentioned, like several weeks, and usually a sighting, you might see twice the same spot, but usually a year, 2 years, whatever, like a long period. But for them to
Right.
come back to the same spot,
So that was very concerning.
yeah,
The military was forced to put out a statement,
right.
because
many witnesses.
everyone
Yeah.
saw it. So the statement that they came up with was it was temperature inversions.
Temperature inversion.
A temperature inversion is where you have two different levels of temperature. One's
heat,
colder than the other, one's hot, one's cold, and because of the light refracting off of or I don't know if it's reflecting,
Oh, deflect. Yeah,
off of one surface onto another, that it looks like things that are on the ground are actually in the sky.
right.
After these sightings took place, and it was reported in the press that these were temperature inversions, the president, Harry Truman at the time, was asked during a press conference,
Right.
did you see these things?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yes, I saw
Wow.
them, but I don't know what they are.
He
And
actually
that was
admitted,
the
yeah.
end of it.
Right.
He didn't say anything else. That was the end of it.
He was probably the only one that admitted of all the one that might have seen something.
Well, there are some that later admitted it.
Later
We'll get to
We'll
that
get
in
into
another episode. But based on that those incursions, and also other sightings at the time, the CIA convened a panel.
Oh,
And
is this what you brought us here?
yes. They convened a panel
So let me.
of the top scientists.
This is the actual document. I mean, one of the actual document copies from the time. Like the paper is the same. You can even see the date of the. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm all for those. Those documents, CIA and.
So this particular panel was made up of some of the scientists were Nobel winners.
Nobel Prizes. Wow.
Yeah, and it was headed by a physicist by the name of Howard P. Robertson. During this panel, which took place from January 14th through 18th of 1953, like I said before, it was convened by the United States Central Intelligence Agency.
Right.
And this here is a report of the meetings of the Scientific Advisory Panel. Okay? During this this meeting that took place over several days, one of the junior scientists who was allowed to participate was Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Oh, him again.
He was one of the junior. He said he was awestruck by the minds in the room during that time. That these were the brilliant minds, and he was just a junior mind.
Wow.
But for the last 4 years, he had been working for the United States Air Force on this particular problem. So he had the most expertise in the area,
Right.
as far as what was going on. But these other
Intimidated him, huh?
he
intimidated.
yeah,
Wow.
So what he said was there were two particular films that they were very interested in. There was one of them was taken in Tremountain, Utah, by a naval officer while he was on vacation, and it was analyzed by the Navy's Photographic Interpretation Laboratory, and they analyzed this film for over 1,000 man-hours.
Wow, that's a long.
That's a
time.
long time. So at
24 hours a
the
day.
end of their analysis, they confirmed that these were not birds, balloons, or conventional aircraft, and determined that they were self-luminous, independently controlled, unidentified objects.
Wow.
But although they agreed that that's what they were, they couldn't be unidentified. Therefore, they had to be called birds.
Birds.
So the second
Right.
film was taken by a local baseball coach in Great Falls, Montana. And this one showed two objects flying one behind the other
Do we have pictures
on a
of this?
horizontal plane, going from right to left and passing behind a tower.
Oh wow.
A conical tower of some type. So these scientists, they got up and got close to the screen
Right.
and asked the film to be shown many, many times so that they could watch it over and over and try to
Get some
see what these
details
objects
and-
were
yeah.
and try to figure out what they were based on how they were moving and or what their shape was. And both of these films were unidentified. They couldn't identify
Right, and
what these were.
You have to think at the time too. I mean, the frame rate was probably 24 frames per second to 15, sometime 15.
Right. And
And if it was 35 millimeters, it's 3.5
no, these were 8 millimeter.
8 millimeters. So it's even smaller. This is
Right.
about
These are
like
8
this.
millimeter.
Very small. You can zoom in. I mean, optically zoom in really with when you develop the film, but
Right.
there's the grain of the film that can't hide all the
Right.
details. You can't.
Yeah, they probably bumped it up and tried to clean it up.
Yeah, you
but,
can't. Yeah, but it's still too grainy. It's so small.
So the conclusion of the panel was that the enemy could exploit UFOs and clog the official channels during an actual attack. So that was their concern.
Right.
Was that if the enemy decided to exploit UFOs,
Right.
that all the phone lines would be busy, all the teletype lines would be busy, and the military would be powerless to try to send orders out to other branches of the military.
Right.
So they decided that based on this assumption that the enemy could exploit UFOs in some way and clog up all the necessary channels that they needed to communicate, that there should be a public relations campaign in order to debunk UFOs
Oh.
and reduce public interest in the subject, and that civil UFO groups should be monitored.
Of course.
So they want to know what these civil groups are doing, what they're saying.
Of course,
what
you
they're-
want a hand on those. Yeah.
Right. I think the debunking program has continued to this day.
To this day. It's the
To this
same.
very day. It started back then.
Right. They
It's
created
still
the
going on
mold
today.
They created the mold and the formula back then.
Going back to Blue Book now. So this meeting took place while Blue Book was in operation.
In operation. Okay.
All right. So going back to Blue Book now, in October 1966, the Air Force, they put out a contract for a university to review their UFO cases and the cases of the civil UFO groups,
Oh, really? Both? Oh.
both, and come up with a determination as to whether the Air Force should continue their investigations.
Oh, interesting.
The University of Colorado was awarded this contract, And the person who ran the program was Edward Condon. And so it became the Condon Committee, so to speak. They analyzed these reports and up until June of 1968. So in 1968, they came out with the final report entitled Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects, and it was released to the Air Force. It concluded that there was low-level interest from the scientific community involving the subject, and that even cases categorized as unidentified could be easily explained away if they had more data.
Never enough data, huh?
Never enough data. So, based on their report, the National Academy of Sciences, I have a copy of the National Academy of Sciences report right here. Would you like to see it?
Yeah, please.
So, this was released in, the Condon report was released on June 12th of 1969.
Yeah, that's...
So this was the National Academy of Sciences review of the Condon report. And they reached a similar conclusion to the Condon Committee's final report. And based on the recommendation of these two reports, the Air Force terminated Project Blue Book in December 1969.
Because of those.
Because of those two reports.
Wow. And the reports are really like 6 pages, well, recto verso. Yeah, like 10 pages, not even. 9 pages. Wow, it's crazy.
Right. Like I said before, based on these two reports and their final findings, the Air Force shut down Project Blue Book in 1969 in December.
So they said.
So, well, Project Blue Book was shut down. It doesn't mean they didn't start something else that we don't know about. However, we don't know at that time if there was another project that was a black project, so to speak. But the Air Force cited the following conclusions based on over 20 years of analysis of UFO subject.
Wow.
These were their findings.
Okay.
They had 3.
Out of 20 years?
Yes. These were their findings.
The findings, okay.
Generalizing, okay? Number 1, no UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force has ever given any indication of threat to our national security. Number 2, there's been no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represent technological developments or principles beyond the present range of scientific knowledge. And 3, there's been no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentified are extraterrestrial vehicles.
Exactly.
We know that number 1 is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Because we'll get into that in another episode. At the conclusion of Blue Book, there were 12,618 cases.
Wow. In Blue Book was how many years?
Blue Book started in 1952.
Right.
And it ended in 69.
So 17 years.
Yeah.
Which is pretty,
It's still a long time.
Yeah, so we're like about 700, 800 cases a year.
Yeah. Well, they varied.
Well,
They
I'm
varied
just saying
by
average.
month. You know,
I'm just saying average.
Some had more, some had less.
Yeah.
But out of the 12,618 cases, 701 remained unidentified after their investigations.
Wow.
They stated that the remaining unidentifieds, the reason for that was they had lack of substantial information to make a more positive determination.
Yeah. Wow.
From Blue Book until several years ago,
Right.
the Air Force denied having any interest
Anything, yeah.
in the UFO subject whatsoever.
Right.
And anytime someone wrote and asked,
It was shut down.
they were told to go to the National Archives and request the documents. And the Air Force has no interest in UFOs.
It's what you did too, for a few times. Did you go? Did you do this way? Did you go?
I went to the National Archives once, yes, and I purchased 2 of these rolls of microfilm here that have Blue Book files on them. These are
Right.
actual microfilm from the National Archives that
Yeah, you
have
can see the
documents
you showed me,
on them.
yeah.
Since Blue Book shut down, the Air Force has denied any investigation of UFOs. However, as we know from several of the videos that we've seen
Right.
that came out several years ago based on the New York Times article, we now know about
Right.
the ATIP program.
Tell people what the ATIP are, because
It's the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. And it was a program by the Department of Defense to analyze some data and some videos mostly from the United States Navy, but
From
from
the Navy,
others,
right.
And there were several videos that were released that were taken from military Navy
right.
gun cameras.
You mean like the Tic Tac and
The Tic Tac, right, and the
those were the
and the gimbal
Right.
UFO. We now know that they weren't telling us the truth.
right, and they were hiding and they were still doing.
So
yeah,
So Congress has asked for a briefing and more documents or whatever to be released
right,
in a couple of months from now.
right. That's true. Yeah.
They were given 180 days
I
to come
think
out with a
more, yeah.
report. So
Yeah.
we'll see what
We'll
happens
see.
then.
Tell us where you got most of those documents you have, because you have a lot of them.
It looks like I have a lot, but there are some people that have
Well,
many
but like,
more
I
than
mean,
I do.
There's that pile right
But
here. From,
these are all acquired from the Freedom of Information Act.
okay.
Thank you, Jimmy Carter,
Yeah.
for that. Because of Jimmy Carter, you're able now to write to any branch of the government, any office in that branch,
Which I
and-
didn't know. I didn't know you
and
could do
request
this.
any documents, films, whatever it might be. Now, they still have the authority to not provide them to
Right.
you or to redact whatever information they feel is
You should know. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But it could be something simple as they could redact someone's name
Right.
or their address
Right,
or
right.
their phone number. You know, it's not information that everyone out there should know.
Right. Because
You know-
I got from the FBI, I think it was the FBI files for all the UFOs, and it's
Right.
a lot of pages are blacked out
Nowadays, you can go online
and get
to any
yeah.
agency and pretty much. I know the the FBI and the CIA.
Yeah, I got
they have
those
their own.
documents.
They have their own page for
UFOs,
downloading UFO documents.
Which means if they do have it, there's something. I'm not saying
But back in the old days, we had to write letters.
right.
Do
Which you did.
you know what those are? Do you remember those days?
They use those.
Right.
Those pens.
We use paper and things to write down, and you put a stamp on it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't email. It was airmail,
Airmail, snail mail.
snail mail, and so
You had to wait weeks,
months.
months sometimes,
Months.
because you'd
Sometimes
have
I would receive a letter back that said, "We've received your letter.
Yeah, and
we need $160
$80 to
days to."
60 days.
Yeah, we need 18 months to process your request or whatever it might be.
Yeah, because it was all hard copy.
It was all hard copy. They had to look for it.
They had to send someone look for it.
They had to send someone to look through a file or microfilm
Or
or
box
whatever
or-
it might
yeah.
have been to find these documents and then decide, are they releasable or not? Have they
Right.
been released already?
Yeah, it's just interesting to see the documents that the government has.
Yeah, I was very curious to see what they had and what they would release.
Yeah, and
And when I requested specific documents, was I going to get the same information that someone else who requested the
Right.
same information?
Have you ever asked the same thing to different people and got, in that case, like 3 different things, or denial, or top of your head?
I had a situation, I won't say which alphabet agency it was,
right.
where I requested some information. I received a letter one day that said they don't have any of that information. And the following day, I received another letter. Here's your information.
Oh, wow. From the same...
From the same person, from the same alphabet agency.
Oh, wow. That's really strange. So a letter to protect themselves, but then a letter to give you the info.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah.
But they didn't exactly tell me, oh, here's your info.
Yeah,
it was given to me in a kind of a backhanded way, like
I see.
So that maybe they won't get in trouble.
Yeah, no, it's what I'm saying. Like that first letter was to cover their butt, and the second letter it was like, you know what? I personally know what's going on. Here's the information. Like
without saying that.
Without saying, but you receiving the first letter, you knew already that's classified. You know, I can't.
The first letter said they didn't have it.
Right.
And then the second letter, I got it.
Right.
Which I thought was very strange. And it was one day apart.
Yeah, so it's just happened. I mean, the person might have
the second letter happened to be about something else. But they included that in the second letter. So I think that's about all we have for today's episode. And also, if you or someone you know has some evidence,
stories, evidence,
photographs, hard evidence,
right,
we're willing to hear what you have to say and what you might have to show.
Right. And I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, and
thank you.
And check back and see our next episode.
And we're doing this stupid thing.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Please.
And leave a comment.
Yeah, leave a nice comment.
Thank you.
A nice one.